Welcome to Spoiler Zone. Today, we are going on an exciting journey through space as I introduce you to an amazing movie called Passengers from 2016. But be prepared because I will be revealing some important details from the film. So, proceed with caution. The story takes place on a spaceship called Avalon, which is traveling through space towards a distant planet called Homestead 2. The ship is designed for both crew members and passengers to hibernate during the journey. However, an accident occurs when the ship passes through an asteroid belt, causing damage to its systems. During the repairs, one hibernation pod opens unexpectedly. The person inside is Jim Preston, a mechanical engineer. He discovers that he woke up 90 years too early and the ship is still far away from reaching its destination. Feeling lonely, Jim tries to find other people on the ship but realizes that everyone else is still asleep. Desperate for human connection, Jim comes across an android bartender named Arthur. They talk, but Jim can't find out why he woke up early. Jim tries to fix his hibernation pod but fails. He also attempts to wake up other crew members but faces difficulties. Despite these challenges, Jim explores the ship's facilities and spends time in the bar, where he shares his thoughts with Arthur. One day, while intoxicated, Jim discovers spacesuits in an airlock. He contemplates going out into space but changes his mind after a moment of hesitation. As he turns back, he notices a woman named Aurora in one of the hibernation pods. Intrigued by her, he reads about her in the ship's files and becomes infatuated with her. Jim wrestles with the idea of waking Aurora up, knowing that she would be stuck on the ship with him. After much contemplation, he decides to awaken her and conceals his involvement. When Aurora wakes up, Jim explains their situation, and they realize they are the only ones awake on the ship. They cannot contact the crew or control the ship. Jim guides Aurora back to her pod, revealing that they can't go back into hibernation because the ship lacks the necessary equipment. Aurora, feeling sympathetic towards Jim's year of loneliness, considers returning to hibernation. Jim encourages her to rest, and she realizes the difficult life he had alone on the ship. Jim enters the bar feeling tired and filled with regret. He approaches Arthur and asks him not to tell Aurora the truth, that Jim is the one who woke her up from hibernation. The next day, Aurora wakes up and goes to the information desk to learn about the hibernation pods. Jim joins her, and they go together to get breakfast. As they leave the desk, it starts to malfunction, but they continue to the cantina. Aurora notices that Jim has been eating the same boring breakfast for over a year. She feels sorry for him and orders a better meal for him. During their meal, they talk about fixing the broken pods. Jim doesn't believe it's possible, but Aurora is determined to try. She searches the infirmary and research documents, and tries to open the crew's hibernation quarters. Jim sees more malfunctions on the ship, showing that things are getting worse. Time passes, and Aurora starts to feel hopeless about their situation. She tries to find comfort by writing, jogging, and swimming. To learn more about Jim, Aurora interviews him in the cantina. She asks why he came to the colony, and he reveals that he wanted to start a new life and be someone important. Later, they go to the observatory, and Aurora tells Jim her plan to go to Homestead 2 and write a remarkable story about it. Aurora's hope for a solution fades, but Jim tries to cheer her up. They go dancing, to the cinema, and to the basketball court. Finally, they meet Arthur at the bar, and Aurora feels relieved, but then remembers their situation. Jim feels guilty for what he did and stays alone with Arthur, the android. But then he starts working on something. Aurora goes to the observatory and finds a small model of the Chrysler building that Jim made for her. Time passes, and they go on a date at the bar. They have a nice dinner and share stories. Aurora reveals that she lost her father when she was a teenager. Then they go to the airlock, put on spacesuits, and go on a spacewalk together, which brings Jim great joy. They deactivate the magnets on their boots and float together in space. From that point on, they become a couple and live together. Jim finds the ship's hydroponics bay and picks flowers for Aurora. On Aurora's birthday, they go to the observatory to see a beautiful red giant. They celebrate in one of the ship's restaurants, and then go to the bar for more fun. Jim briefly leaves to prepare a ring for Aurora in the washroom, but Arthur unintentionally reveals that Jim woke her up on purpose. She is shocked and angry and runs away. When Jim returns to his cabin, he finds that she has left and taken all her belongings. The next day, Jim sees Aurora in the cantina, but she quickly leaves and avoids him. Aurora feels desperate and on the verge of despair. One night, she bursts into Jim's cabin and attacks him, seeking revenge. Despite Aurora's attempts to avoid him, Jim talks to her through the ship's communications system. He apologizes and expresses his love for her, but Aurora remains unforgiving. One night, while Jim is in his cabin, another malfunction occurs on the ship. The main command stops working. Jim gets trapped in a malfunctioning elevator, while Aurora sees that Jim has planted a tree amidst the chaos. Curious and hopeful, Aurora goes to the cantina, where the food dispenser is also malfunctioning. They hear a voice through the ship's communication system, asking about the tree. Jim and Aurora rush to the concourse and find Gus Mancuso, the chief engineer, standing by Jim's tree. They introduce themselves and tell the chief about the current problem. The chief is confused because they don't understand how 3 pods could have failed. Mancuso takes them to the bridge, where they discover that something is wrong with the ship. But they have to manually check the system's information. As they leave the bridge, a robot almost falls on them, so they tell Mancuso about the increasing number of malfunctions on the ship. Mancuso is worried because these things shouldn't be happening. He shows them how to collect the necessary data. While Mancuso inspects the pods, Jim joins him and figures out why Aurora's pod isn't working properly. The deck chief is shocked by Jim's actions. Later, at the bridge, Mancuso examines the data they gathered when Aurora arrives. They talk about what happened to her pod. Sadly, Mancuso admits that he can't fix the problem. Jim comes in with another broken robot, making the total 16. Mancuso gets sick and decides to rest, but as he leaves, he coughs up blood. That night, Aurora can't sleep and goes for a swim. Suddenly, there's no gravity on the ship, and she almost drowns in the pool. Luckily, the gravity comes back just in time to save her. By chance, they meet each other while looking for Mancuso. The 3 of them meet at the bridge and start to understand what's wrong with the ship. Mancuso realizes that something terrible happened 2 years ago and damaged an important system. They need to find and fix the problem quickly to avoid getting stuck. They go on a mission to find the problem, but Mancuso faints. Jim and Aurora take him to the infirmary and find out that he's very sick and can't be treated. Sometime later, the 3 of them meet in the observatory. Mancuso gives Jim his ID bracelet and tells them to fix the ship before he dies. Suddenly, the ship's lights start flashing red, and it shakes violently. Jim asks Aurora for help, and they rush to engineering. But there's another problem with the gravity drive, and Arthur is affected too. Jim turns Arthur off to stop the harm. Finally, they reach engineering and start looking for the problem. They find the issue in the power plant, where an asteroid damaged the hull. Aurora gets sucked into the breach, but Jim holds onto the hatch and prevents himself from being pulled into space. He eventually gets sucked out too, but they close the breach. Right after fixing the first breach, Jim realizes there are more breaches in the hull. They follow the path of the meteor and find that it hit the reactor control computer. Jim thinks he can find replacement parts to fix it. After getting the necessary component and installing it, they have trouble venting the reactor. Jim realizes that he has to open the vent door from outside the ship to cool down the reactor. Jim and Aurora go to the airlock, where he gets ready to go outside. Before he leaves, he gives Aurora Mancuso's bracelet and knows he might not come back. She helps him put on the suit and begs him to return. While Aurora stays in the reactor room, the temperature gets dangerously high, and she gets hurt by a bolt from the reactor. Meanwhile, Jim tries to open the vent door from the outside but struggles. He explains to Aurora why it's necessary to his plan. She doesn't want to do it, but Jim insists because it's important to save the remaining crew members. Reluctantly, Aurora follows his instructions and successfully vents the reactor. Unfortunately, the fumes from the reactor push Jim away and break his tether, causing his suit to lose pressure. Jim tells Aurora what's happening, and she desperately searches for another suit to rescue him. She finds one but realizes her tether is too short. Desperate, she grabs his tether and manages to pull him back inside. Aurora takes Jim to the infirmary, but he dies because of the harsh conditions in space. She uses Mancuso's bracelet to revive him using the medical pod. Aurora, after much contemplation, finds it in her heart to forgive Jim for his regrettable actions. With their fractured relationship on the mend, Aurora takes it upon herself to repair Arthur, and together they arrange a solemn and dignified space burial for Mancuso. Amidst these reconciliations and farewells, Jim guides Aurora to the ship's infirmary, unveiling a surprising revelation about the medical pod. It can also serve as a hibernation chamber. Aware of the long and solitary journey that lies ahead, Jim gently proposes the idea of Aurora entering hibernation, preserving her well-being for the remainder of the voyage. Despite the tempting prospect of an extended slumber, Aurora stuns Jim with an unexpected decision. Driven by her deepening connection with him and the newfound resilience within herself, she adamantly chooses to remain conscious and awake alongside Jim throughout the entirety of their journey. They embrace the uncertainty and challenges that await them, drawing strength from their love and mutual support. In a moment of profound vulnerability and affection, Jim takes a leap of faith and proposes to Aurora. Overwhelmed by joy, she wholeheartedly accepts, solidifying their commitment to each other amidst the vastness of space. From that day forward, their lives intertwine, sharing both the triumphs and tribulations that come their way as they traverse the cosmic expanse. As the years unfold within the confined walls of the Avalon, their love flourishes. 88 years pass, a testament to the resilience of their bond, when the long-awaited destination of Homestead 2 finally looms into view. The crew members, roused from their slumber, awaken to a sight that defies their expectations. Hope you enjoyed this video. For more movie explanations and analysis, make sure to subscribe and check out our other videos.